It started with laughter, music, and the smell of barbecue drifting over the fence. A perfect Saturday afternoon pool party. Nothing wild, just close friends, a few neighbors, and some folks I'd met through local community work. Everyone was having a great time. Until Karen, my favorite binocular-wielding neighbor across the street, decided the fun was too much for her fragile peace and quiet. Next thing I know, 2 squad cars roll up, lights flashing like someone had reported a riot instead of backyard burgers. Karen stood proudly on her porch, arms crossed, thinking she'd just shut down the nuisance next door. But here's what she didn't know. This noise complaint may look like a simple case of neighborhood rules enforcement, but it's not what you think, because she didn't realize my guest list included the city commissioner's family. And let's just say, once the officers stepped into the backyard and recognized a few familiar faces, it wasn't my party that got shut down. It was Karen's credibility. When I bought the house on Elmwood Drive, I wasn't looking for anything flashy. I didn't need a mansion, a golf course view, or 5-car garage. I just wanted a place that felt like home, something with good bones, a bit of space, and room to host the people I care about. After years of bouncing between cities for work, I was ready for roots. Something stable, quiet, real. The house checked all my boxes. 3 bedrooms, tall oak trees lining the back fence, and the real prize, a large, sparkling in-ground pool surrounded by a wide concrete patio. The backyard was made for summer nights. The first time I saw it, I could already picture friends gathered around the grill, string lights overhead, music low, drinks clinking, and kids laughing in the shallow end. It wasn't a palace, but it felt like mine. The neighborhood had that classic suburban charm. Lawns trimmed, mailboxes matching, joggers waving on morning runs. People cared about their homes. It wasn't pretentious, just tidy, safe, clean. The kind of place where people still brought cookies to new neighbors and hosted 4th of July parades for the kids. It reminded me of where I grew up, back when people actually knew the names of the folks living 2 doors down. Moving in was easy. I met most of my immediate neighbors the first week. Older couple to my left, young family on the right, a retired vet across the street. Everyone smiled, shook hands, and offered to help if I ever needed anything. And then there was Karen. Karen lived directly across from me. 2-story beige house, flower beds shaped with surgical precision, and wind chimes that never stopped even when there was no wind. I noticed her the first day I moved in. Not because she introduced herself, but because she watched. Not in a rude way exactly, but in that over-invested way that makes you straighten up even when you're just bringing groceries inside. She kept to herself mostly. No welcome to the neighborhood speech. No baked goods. But every time I waved, she gave the same tight smile and nod. The kind that says, I'm watching, and I'll be watching tomorrow too. Still, I didn't think much of it. Some folks are just wired that way. I made it a point to be a good neighbor. I kept the lawn trimmed, brought my bins in on time, parked in my own driveway, and never played loud music past sundown. I wasn't here to ruffle feathers. I just wanted to live in peace, meet good people, and maybe throw a few barbecues here and there when the weather was nice. And honestly, it worked. Within a few months, I got to know a dozen households around me. Some were casual friendships, wave-in chat at the mailbox type. Others became real connections. I even started volunteering at the city's monthly cleanup program and got to know a few people from City Hall. One of them was a Parks and Rec liaison named Sophia. She was sharp, funny, and happened to be married to one of the city commissioner's nephews. We hit it off during a landscaping project at the public library, and before long, I was helping organize supply drives and weekend cleanups for other neighborhoods too. It wasn't about politics or networking. I just liked being useful, and people noticed. One thing led to another, and soon I was on a first-name basis with a few of the commissioner's extended family. All good folks who appreciated a low-key guy who showed up, did the work, and didn't brag about it. Over time, we shared meals, helped each other out on projects, and occasionally gathered at my place for casual get-togethers. Nothing fancy, just good food and better company. Despite all this, Karen remained. Karen, she'd watch from across the street, arms folded whenever I had guests over. I'd see her peeking through her blinds during birthday parties, tapping away on her phone as people walked from their cars to my backyard gate. But she never said anything directly. No warnings. No complaints. No HOA letters. Just that constant judging presence, like a neighborhood drone programmed to monitor civic decency. Still, I let it slide. I figured she was just protective of the neighborhood, maybe even a little lonely. Besides, I wasn't breaking any rules. My guests were respectful. We parked legally. Volume never crossed the city's threshold. Everything was above board. So I kept living. I hosted a birthday for my godson. Bounce house, hot dogs, bubbles. Karen watched the whole time from her porch with a book she clearly wasn't reading. Nothing happened. I had a cookout with some coworkers. Half of them brought their kids, the other half brought potato salad. Karen took photos from her yard like she was documenting criminal activity. Still, no complaints. It became a kind of unspoken ritual. I'd host. She'd hover. It didn't bother me. Not really. Until the day I sent out invites for a midsummer pool party. Just a simple Saturday get-together for some close friends, a few folks from city cleanup, and Sophia's family, including her husband and his aunt, the city commissioner herself. I didn't advertise that fact. Didn't hang a banner. But if Karen had asked, I would have told her. Not that I owed her that courtesy, but because I had nothing to hide. I was proud of the connections I'd built, all based on trust, respect, and showing up when it mattered. As the party date approached, I spent the week preparing. I cleaned the pool, pressure washed the patio, stocked the fridge, and bought enough charcoal to feed a summer camp. I double-checked the HOA guidelines just to be sure. No violations on file, no restrictions on private gatherings under a certain head count, and as long as noise was within city standards, there was no problem. Everything was lined up for a perfect day. And for a while it was, until Karen decided otherwise. The day of the pool party started out just like I planned. Sunshine, 82 degrees, a light breeze coming through the backyard trees. I'd spent the morning icing down coolers, prepping burgers and skewers, and lining up lawn chairs under the shade umbrellas. By noon, the first guests began trickling in. Families, a couple of coworkers, friend from city outreach events. All of them polite, cheerful, and dressed for a laid-back Saturday afternoon. The playlist was set to mellow summer classics. Think Otis Redding, Jack Johnson, nothing louder than conversation. Kids jumped into the shallow end with pool noodles. Adults gathered near the grill, catching up over lemonade and bottled beer. It was by every metric a calm neighborhood get-together. The kind of scene HOA brochures pretend to promote. Except, of course, there was one neighbor who didn't see it that way. Karen. By the time the second round of burgers hit the grill, she was already outside. Not to mingle, not to say hi, just standing, arms folded, sunglasses on, locked in at the edge of her driveway, like she was watching a hostile invasion unfold in real time. I glanced over once and gave her a friendly wave. She didn't return it. At first, I chalked it up to routine Karen behavior. She always made an appearance when anything lively happened within her line of sight. I'd seen her do the same thing when the neighbor's kids had a bounce house last fall. She hovered, watched, and then disappeared. No interaction, no complaints. So I didn't think much of it. I continued hosting. More people arrived. Sophia showed up with her husband and their son. She gave me a hug, handed me a dish of homemade spinach dip, and said, "Thanks again for doing this. He's been looking forward to the pool all week." We laughed, exchanged a few updates, and she led her son over to the water while her husband helped me with the grill. Everything felt normal, until the black SUV pulled up. It happened just after 3 p.m. as we were slicing into the first watermelon. 2 police officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts but not on them. Calm, casual, but definitely on duty. At first, I thought it might be a coincidence. Maybe they were just checking on something down the block. Then they started walking straight toward my backyard gate. That's when I knew. Karen had called the cops. I exchanged a quick look with Sophia, who raised an eyebrow. Her husband, a quiet, steady guy named Raymond, took a step forward with a neutral expression. I met the officers halfway. "Afternoon, gentlemen," I said, keeping my tone relaxed. "Everything okay?" The taller one nodded. "Got a report of a disturbance, possible unregistered event, noise complaint, and parking overflow." I didn't even have to ask who called. I just gestured to the backyard. "You're welcome to take a look. Everything's well within city code." The other officer, younger, peered past me. Looks pretty chill back there. Music's at a normal volume. People are parked along the curb legally, and this isn't a public event. Just a backyard gathering. You're free to walk through and verify. To their credit, they didn't come in aggressive. They stepped through the gate like they were checking out a suspicious barbecue contest. Then they saw Sophia, and their expressions changed. Sophia, the older officer asked, blinking in recognition. She smiled and stood up from her poolside chair. Hey, Marcus. Good to see you. The officers looked at each other, then back at her. Didn't expect to find you here. She laughed lightly. Didn't expect you'd be called here either. Raymond stepped forward and offered a handshake to both men. Glad you made it, he said casually. Sorry the invitation didn't come with a warrant. The officers chuckled, easing even further. I watched their body language shift from inspection mode to realization. And then it happened. From across the street, Karen began walking briskly toward my gate. She was holding a folder, no doubt full of printed HOA bylaws or made-up rules about quiet hour protocols. Her mouth was already moving before she stepped onto my property line. This is an ongoing disturbance, she said loudly. This party is in violation of. Officer Marcus turned to face her. Ma'am, everything here is in compliance. Karen blinked. But the noise. No louder than a lawnmower, the younger officer cut in. No violations of city code. But they didn't register this as a community event. It's a private gathering, Raymond said calmly. And just so we're clear, I'm here with my wife and son, as is my aunt. The commissioner. Karen froze mid-step. I don't think I'll ever forget the look on her face, that split second of full realization, the mental math, the breath catching in her throat. Sophia walked over slowly. Karen, is there a problem? Karen swallowed. I wasn't aware you were attending. You didn't ask. The officers exchanged glances again, and one of them made a subtle note on his tablet. Karen shifted uncomfortably, her voice quieter now. I was just concerned about the volume, that's all. I finally stepped forward, speaking for the first time since she arrived. I understand. But next time, maybe ask before calling the police. Karen muttered something about neighborhood standards and turned to leave, folder clutched tighter than ever. As she walked back across the street, I noticed that the rest of the party had gone silent. Then came the laughter. Not loud, not mocking, just the kind of collective chuckle that says, wow, that really backfired. The music resumed. Burgers flipped. Kids splashed. And Karen? She didn't come back out for the rest of the day. Karen didn't leave the situation alone like I thought she might. After her walk of shame back across the street during the initial police visit, most people would have taken a hint, maybe quietly closed their blinds, reevaluated their decisions, and tried to pretend nothing happened. But not Karen. Her pride wasn't just bruised, it was on fire. And she wasn't done trying to control the narrative. 15 minutes after the officers reassured us we were doing nothing wrong and resumed casual conversation with a few of my guests. Yes, still very much present, Karen returned. Not across the street this time, but down the sidewalk through the open side gate and directly into my backyard. Uninvited, unapologetic. She walked with stiff shoulders, clutching that same folder of HOA paperwork like it was the U.S. Constitution. Guests turned to look. Conversation slowed. One of the neighborhood teens pulled out a phone. Karen was already speaking as she marched up to me. I'm going to have to formally document this violation, she said sharply, since it seems you don't take written policy seriously. I raised an eyebrow. You walked into my backyard, past my guests, after police already cleared everything. There's nothing in the bylaws that prevents enforcement action following police dismissal, she snapped. You're hosting an unregistered community event. I exhaled slowly, calm and deliberate. It's not a community event, Karen. It's a private gathering. You're trespassing. That word, trespassing, got her attention. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but she doubled down. As a board member, I'm within my rights to perform property assessments related to code violations. That was bold. That was also a lie. Before I could respond, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Someone was walking toward us from the patio, graceful, composed, with purpose in her step. It was Commissioner Elena Vargas, Sophia's aunt, city commissioner. A woman who carried the quiet authority of someone used to making real decisions, not HOA newsletters. She stopped beside me and looked Karen straight in the eye. "Excuse me," she said, voice cool but firm. "You're on someone's private property. Is there a reason for that?" Karen faltered. I'm just trying to enforce policy. This gathering hasn't been logged with the HOA. Elena tilted her head. "And your name is?" "Karen Wexley. I'm on the Clearwater HOA board." Elena nodded, extending her hand. "Elena Vargas, City Commissioner. This is my nephew's home, and my family has been here all afternoon." Karen stared. Her face went pale. I wasn't aware of your presence," she stammered. "That's clear," Elena replied. "But even if I weren't here, it wouldn't change the facts. The officers already confirmed this gathering isn't in violation of any city code or ordinance. And as far as I can tell, the only person breaking any rules is you." "I wasn't trying to cause trouble," Karen muttered, lowering her voice. Elena didn't raise hers. "She didn't have to." "Then perhaps you should leave," she said, "before this turns into something more serious." Karen opened her mouth, closed it, and turned on her heel. "No argument. No bluster. Just a quiet retreat." It was over. Sort of. Because when someone like Karen overreaches in front of the wrong crowd, especially a crowd that includes members of local government, consequences have a way of following. That evening, after the party wound down and the sun dipped below the rooftops, I got a call from Sophia. "Just a heads up," she said. "My aunt's already filed an incident report with the city. Not against you, against Karen." "For what?" "Harassment. Misuse of HOA authority. Possible trespass. She's not trying to ruin the woman's life, but she wants it on record. And knowing my aunt, it'll be thorough." I thanked her and went back to cleaning up. The pool was still and glassy. The backyard quiet again, save for the soft hum of string lights and the low hiss of the patio heater. For the first time all day, I allowed myself a chuckle. Karen had tried to flex her HOA status like it was a badge. She'd marched into my space, tried to impose control, and ended up calling the cops on a party filled with people who, ironically, had more influence than she could dream of. And now, she wasn't just the nosy neighbor across the street. She was the woman who walked into a city commissioner's family barbecue and accused her of violating pool party etiquette. By Monday, the whispers had already started. Two of my neighbors stopped me during a morning walk. "Hey," one said carefully, "did that really happen?" "Depends on what you heard. That Karen called the cops on you and ended up getting chewed out by someone from the mayor's office." "Close enough," I replied with a grin. Word traveled fast. By the end of the week, the HOA board issued a formal statement. They'd received reports of inappropriate conduct by a board member during a private residential gathering, and were reviewing protocols regarding community involvement and enforcement behavior. The letter didn't name Karen directly. It didn't have to. Everyone knew. I even got a call from Officer Marcus. "Just checking in," he said. "Want to say thanks again for handling that with class. Some folks would have escalated." "You guys were solid," I replied. "Hope you got to finish your shift in peace." "We did," he chuckled. "Also, Commissioner Vargas called the precinct personally. Gave us a commendation. That was new. I never expected my backyard cookout to turn into a civil standoff. But if it had to happen, I was glad it happened the way it did. Quiet strength, public facts, and just the right amount of karma. I didn't throw another big gathering for a while. Didn't need to. The message had been sent loud and clear. I wasn't the one who needed to learn how to behave in this neighborhood. And from that day forward, Karen stayed on her porch. But she never crossed the street again. If Karen thought the story would quietly disappear after her failed ambush, she seriously underestimated just how many eyes had witnessed her unravel in real time. By the following Monday, the wheels of accountability had already started turning, and for once, they weren't aimed at the innocent party. The first official domino fell in the form of a certified letter delivered directly to Karen's doorstep from City Hall. Inside was a formal notice, a complaint filed by Commissioner Elena Vargas and her staff, citing unlawful harassment, abuse of position, and trespass on private property. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but it carried the weight of public office behind it. More importantly, it triggered mandatory review procedures at the HOA level. I found out from Sophia who texted me a screenshot of the internal bulletin sent to all HOA board members. An official complaint has been filed regarding board member conduct at a private residence on Elmwood Drive. The HOA is required to review this matter and consult legal counsel regarding possible violations of enforcement boundaries and homeowner rights. It was the first time I'd seen the HOA acknowledge that board members even had boundaries. That alone was historic. Later that day, a public statement was posted on the HOA's website, bland, generic, and clearly lawyer-scrubbed. Clearwater Neighborhood Association is committed to maintaining respectful relationships with all homeowners and ensuring that community policies are applied fairly and responsibly. We are aware of a recent incident involving a board member and are actively reviewing the matter. No names were mentioned, but everybody knew. The real fallout came from the community. Over the next few days, I noticed something strange, a quiet kind of shift like a flock of birds slowly changing direction in the sky. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact or mumbled Karen's complaints as gospel suddenly began keeping their distance from her. The woman who used to wave HOA flyers like she was handing out gospel now walked her dog at off hours. The couple down the block, who were always quick to parrot Karen's thoughts on neighborhood decorum, suddenly started bringing their kids over to the sidewalk in front of my house for scooter rides. No words, just smiles and nods. Whispers started floating through the neighborhood. She called the cops on the commissioner's family. She went into his yard, didn't even apologize. She brought HOA documents to a cookout. It was like watching a high school mean girl get exposed in front of the entire class. The fear she once inspired, replaced with disbelief and quiet contempt. And just when things started to cool down, the commissioner's office made it official. That Thursday, the city's Office of Community Engagement released a public memo, short and surgical. The city supports and encourages private citizens to host lawful, peaceful gatherings at their own residences, without fear of harassment or misrepresentation of civic authority. We thank all residents who continue to demonstrate respect for one another's property and privacy. It didn't mention my name. It didn't mention Karen's either, but it landed like a gavel. Local reporters picked up the memo. A few community blogs posted the story, calling it the pool party incident. One headline read, "Backyard party ends with political splash after HOA overreach." I didn't do interviews, didn't grandstand, but the narrative was clear to everyone who followed it. A woman with a clipboard tried to play sheriff and ended up being reminded that real authority doesn't come from self-printed bylaws. The next HOA meeting was packed. For the first time since I'd moved into Clearwater, I actually attended. Not to speak, just to listen. To observe. Karen showed up 15 minutes late. She looked smaller than usual, not physically, but in presence. She sat 2 rows from the front, her folder nowhere in sight, her voice absent during every agenda item. When public comment opened, one woman stood and, very calmly, read a statement. Board members are expected to lead by example. We're here to build community, not patrol it. If we can't agree on that, maybe we need a new board. I got a few nods, a couple of quiet claps. Karen didn't respond. She sat still, jaw clenched, eyes on the floor. The board didn't remove her, not officially. But within 2 weeks, she stepped down to focus on family. Her house didn't go up for sale, but the blind stayed closed a lot more often. She became a background fixture instead of a neighborhood tyrant. And for me, life resumed, peacefully. Neighbors who once hovered near the fence line now greeted me by name. I got thank you notes from 2 families who had seen the incident unfold and wanted to apologize for not stepping in sooner. One of them even baked cookies. The biggest surprise came from Officer Marcus, who returned one evening while patrolling the neighborhood. He parked in front of my house, stepped out, and handed me a sealed envelope. From the commissioner's office, he said with a smile. Inside was a simple, handwritten note. Thank you for your calm, your character, and your clarity. The city needs more homeowners like you. Comisioner Elena Vargas. I never set out to prove anything. I wasn't trying to flex influence or embarrass anyone. I just wanted to enjoy my backyard, play a little music, feed some friends, and celebrate life without having to justify it to a self-appointed neighborhood watch captain. But the truth is, sometimes calm is power. And facts, once laid bare, speak louder than Karen ever could. No shouting, no retaliation, just the slow, steady consequences of being wrong in front of the right people. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood changed, not in some dramatic, fence-tearing, lawsuit-filing kind of way, but in all the small, telling details. Karen, once the self-anointed guardian of community standards, practically disappeared. Her blind stayed shut more often than not. The garden she used to prune religiously began to wilt. No more HOA flyers and mailboxes. No more long stares from across the street. She still lived there, of course, but her presence faded from public life like a watermark in the rain. At the next HOA meeting, her name was absent from the speaker list. And by the time the newsletter came around that month, she was no longer listed on any committee. Not beautification, not safety watch, not even the community harmony group she'd insisted on founding 2 years prior. She wasn't removed. She just deflated. And truthfully, that was enough. I wasn't after revenge. I didn't need her dragged through the mud. I just wanted my yard, my music, and my right to host a burger-filled Saturday afternoon without feeling like I was being judged from behind a curtain. That peace returned quietly. It started with small acknowledgments. The couple 2 doors down, the ones who once avoided eye contact whenever Karen stood in her driveway, stopped by one evening with a bottle of wine. No explanation, just a gift and a quiet. We're glad you stayed. The elderly man who walks his schnauzer at dawn, he gave me a double nod and said, "You handle that with class." Even the teenager who filmed Karen's backyard entrance sent me a short message on Instagram. "Your party had better energy than our prom." But the one that meant the most came from a woman named Maria, who lived in the corner house near the cul-de-sac. I'd spoken to her maybe twice before. One afternoon, she caught me while I was watering the flower beds and said, "Thank you for not making it ugly." Some of us knew she was wrong, but we didn't know how to say it. That was the part no one saw. The number of people who weren't on Karen's side, but stayed quiet because they didn't want to get pulled into the storm. I didn't blame them. HOA politics are weirdly intense. But now that the air had cleared, they were stepping into the light, slowly, kindly. Then, something unexpected happened. Sophia reached out again, this time not just as a neighbor or family member, but on behalf of the city. The Community Outreach Council is hosting a series on de-escalation and respectful advocacy, she said. Would you be willing to share your experience? At first, I hesitated. I'm not a public speaker. I'm just a guy with a backyard and a grill. But she made a good point. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't threaten anyone. You used facts, stayed calm, and let the truth speak. That matters. So I agreed. It wasn't a big event, just a community hall with folding chairs and free coffee. But I stood up, told the story, and watched people nod along. Some laughed when I got to the part about Karen showing up with her folder. Others leaned in when I described the moment the commissioner stepped forward. But the best part came after, when a young couple approached me and said, "We just bought a home in a different HOA control neighborhood, and this gives us hope. Thank you." That's when I realized it wasn't just about one party, one Karen, or one neighborhood. It was about the quiet war between people trying to live peacefully and people who confuse authority with control. Back home, things settled into a new kind of normal. I didn't throw another giant party, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't feel the need to prove anything. Instead, I started hosting smaller gatherings. A handful of friends, some music on the speaker, backyard movie nights projected on the fence, families with kids, couples from down the street. Even Officer Marcus stopped by one night off duty, bringing his famous chili and a lawn chair. And this time, no blind squeeching, no silent staring from across the street. Karen stayed inside. She'd lost the only thing that had given her power, the illusion of control backed by silence. And I'd gained something I didn't expect, respect. Not the kind you demand. The kind you earn by doing nothing more than standing your ground the right way. The pool sparkled again. The grill sizzled again. And my backyard, once the site of a power grab disguised as policy enforcement, became what it was always meant to be, a place where people could feel welcome, safe, and free to enjoy life, without fearing the wrath of a clipboard. If you're HOA or anyone else thinks calling the cops will scare you into silence, remember, when your guest list includes the right names, The truth doesn't just defend you, it exposes them. It's easy to feel cornered when someone abuses authority in your own neighborhood. They come with rules, citations, threats, and worst of all, the assumption that you won't push back. But authority built on fear only works when people let themselves be intimidated. The moment you stand calmly, speak clearly, and let facts walk beside you, the entire game changes. I didn't fight fire with fire. I didn't scream louder. I just stood in my backyard, let the right people speak for themselves, and let the law, and a little irony, handle the rest. Karen didn't realize she wasn't dealing with just a neighbor. She was dealing with someone who knew his rights and had friends in the right places. So next time someone knocks on your joy with a clipboard and a smirk, don't panic. Look around. Remember who you are. And don't forget, sometimes the strongest defense is just the truth, spoken out loud, with a few city officials relaxing by your pool.